Welcome to Italics, television for the Italian American experience. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. On this episode, we speak with co-curator Laura and Ruberto about the exhibition Creativity in World War II, Italian POWs in the United States, currently on view at the John D. Calandra Italian American Institute. We also take you to the National Italian American Foundation's annual New York Gala, which celebrated its 50th anniversary. The exhibition, curated by Laura, Ruberto and Joseph Sciorra, presents creative work made by Italian soldiers who were imprisoned by the Allied forces during World War II. It is a story that focuses on United States enemy combatants, some of whom became allies midway through the war, while others remained committed fascists. The exhibition will run from May 1st to September 26th at the Calandra Institute. Laura, welcome to Italics. Welcome to the Calandra Institute.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be back. It's always a joy to be here.
Explain to us a little bit two things. One, why the exhibit? And two, who are these prisoners of war?
Sure. The exhibit is called Creativity in World War II Italian POWs in the United States. We decided to mostly talk about Italian POWs in the United States, although the exhibit gestures towards a more transnational experience and Italian POWs who were captured and brought to other parts of the world. The exhibit captures a body of creative work, from paintings to architecture to all different kinds of expressions that prisoners of war made while they were imprisoned in the United States. And it collects them in a manner that hasn't been done before and tells this little known story really about Italian prisoners of war in the United States through their creative expressions, through their art making.
Right.
As far as who they were, there were about 51,000 Italian prisoners of war here in the United States during the Second World War. Most of them had been taken prisoner by the British, some of them by the Americans as well, and they were brought to the US starting in December 42. At that point, Italy is still an enemy to the US. And then by the summer and fall of 43, they're all here, about 51,000. And after the armistice is signed in September 1943, we have this kind of dilemma for the Italian POWs in the US, because in theory, they're now friends of Italy. But because of the guidelines of the Geneva Convention, they were not permitted to be repatriated to Italy. So they had to stay within US soil until the end of the war. And the US and Italy had to figure out what to do with them. The same thing happened with about 500,000 Italian prisoners of war who were in British Commonwealth countries after
500,000?
About a 500,000
wow.
Total. Total during World War II, roughly 1.2 million Italian military were at some point captured. Half of them, roughly 600,000, these are round numbers, became what are called Italian military internees. Well, towards the end of the war, after Italy and Germany became enemies. And these were men who were fighting for Italy and then refused to continue to fight for Germany. And so Germany captured them, imprisoned them, and called them IMIs. We're not covering them, but they're part of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The other half includes those who were eventually put in prisons in Russia, as well as those within the British Commonwealth. They were sent to Australia, to India, to Scotland, to South Africa, all over the globe. And then there's a small but significant number, 51,000 about, who are the ones that we're mainly focusing on in this exhibit. But the story gets more complicated, as I was saying, after the armistice, because those 51,000, in theory, they're not POWs any longer, right? But in September, nothing changes right away. It takes about 5 or 6 months before anything changes. And at that point, the US gives the POWs kind of an option to either sign an allegiance to the Allied forces or not. Some of them are just immediately deemed a security threat, and they're not even given the option. But in the end, of the 51,000, about 38,000 of them chose to sign an allegiance to the Allied forces. Those 31,000 became collaborating POWs, or Italian Service Unit members, ISUs. And those 38,000 are the ones that most of us, if we know anything, if we've heard about Italian prisoners of war in the US, we've probably heard about the ISUs. They wore little Italy patches on their uniforms. They were sent to different camps that were a little bit less restricted. They were allowed to go out into the community to meet with family sometimes, with paesani, to meet new people. They had some liberties. They got paid a little bit more for their labor, but they were still restricted in their movement to many degrees. They were not allowed to go back to Italy. Sometimes I and others talk about them as part of the Italian diaspora.
Sure.
They are making home however they can. Yeah, the way they decorated their campsites, the gardens. Another way we see this in the way they practiced their Catholicism, their faith. Women have told me that their mothers, for instance, made them go to the camps every Sunday to bring food. Sometimes they weren't allowed in, sometimes they were. People would go to see if they knew anyone from their hometown or their region, or maybe even a family member. And there are dozens of cases of romances, of courtships. For the most part, those men who did have some kind of courtship, they had to still go back to Italy at the end of the war. And in fact, the women, Italian American or otherwise, in many cases they had to go to Italy to get married, actually.
And to bring them back.
Yeah, and there was no kind of deal made to have them stay here.
These were prisoners of war. I'm assuming they were fairly young men. They were drafted into the army and things of that
Yeah, they're
sort, right?
really certainly of all ages, but yes, just like the rest of the Italian army, it was made up of drafted and volunteers, right? Some of them were members of the fascist party, some of them were not. I think it's important to note that of those 51,000, there was about 16,000 or so who did not sign the allegiance.
They were hardcore dedicated Italians to the regime.
Yes,
and the fascist regime.
Yeah, they were called non-collaborators, and they had all kinds of reasons for not signing. Yeah. Some of them said it had to do with, well, they had made a decision and a promise, let's say, to the nation state, then they couldn't just change that. So there was a variety of reasons, but we know that some of them were fairly committed in their ideologies.
So what do we know about how that affected the daily life of wherever they were, the camps, et cetera, wherever they lived?
So those who remained as non-collaborating POWs were sent to higher security prisons. The most famous one is in Hereford, Texas. And we have a few examples of art from there. We have a piece by Alberto Burri, who is probably the most famous POW artist. He became a well-known arte povera artist after World War II. He began his art career really as a non-collaborating POW in Hereford, Texas. Alberto Burri is probably the most famous visual artist that comes out of this, at least in the US case. But there are also writers, for instance, Giuseppe Berto, who was also in Texas.
We have here the exhibit, which would say his coffee table book, right? We would say today, right? Because it's something like 12 by 18 inches.
It's a very large book called Il Guado, a full collection, handwritten of essays and stories, poems, paintings, drawings, musical compositions. It's quite a striking book. Armando Boscolo is another name. He wrote one of the most well-known memoirs called Fame in America, Hunger in America, about his time in Texas. It's interesting that the Texas case, in a sense, becomes the most well-known with respect to artistry, but in fact there's so much more artistry out there. There were also some of them sent to other parts of the West in the continental US, and a little bit over 5,000 of them were sent to the territory of Hawaii. That's a very particular case because they were men who were deemed to be too threatening even to stay in Hereford, Texas, or in Washington or Utah. They have left a legacy there in Hawaii. There are a couple of fountains that they built there. There are statues that they built there, and walls and gardens that they worked on. Their legacy stays there in a really interesting way. Through some research that I did, I've been able to start to trace some of the artists back to Italy and to their family that's still alive, as well as some of the artwork. We have, for instance, a painting in the exhibit that was brought to me by the daughter of the girl who's in the painting. The painting was done by one of these muralists in Wyoming, and we were able to kind of bring these pieces back together, if you will. And I find that really important, that the family that still holds this portrait of their mother as a child now has a bigger story behind it, and they can kind of fill that in and understand where it came from. What's really wonderful about the art that is collected here is it's just a wide variety. Some of the men arrived to the camps already as trained artists, with practiced skills and craft. Others picked up something new while they were here. Overwhelmingly, they created their art through kind of a scavenged, recycled kind of model. Whatever they could find, that's what they made their pieces out. We have a beautiful photo of a man building a replica of the cathedral from Messina out of tin rations, can rations. So just a miniature of that. But at the same time, we have very skilled architects, designers of different kinds, graphic artists, engineers. There are really large pieces. There's the Letterkenny Chapel in Pennsylvania. This quite impressive, I believe it's a 65-foot bell tower structure that is still used today. And then there are very small pieces as well.
But I'm looking behind you, and there's the Tower of Pisa, for
Yes.
example. Now, how big is that Tower of Pisa?
We suspect it's about probably 20 or 30 feet high because there's a building behind it, and you can see
sort of
that,
zero
yeah.
out.
So
Right.
that was at an Italian service unit camp that was made up entirely of engineers, which was interesting that
Okay.
they brought them all there.
Yeah.
And they made a lot of structures in their
made the
garden.
leaning-
And they
it's
decided
leaning.
to make the Leaning Tower of Pisa. We don't really know why. Were
Yeah.
they playing around? Were they bored? Were they tasked with that job?
Yeah.
It seems unlikely.
What else is out there? Like, are there archives, number one? that
There
you-
is no single archive that this exhibit pulls from. There's really only a few institutions that have saved pieces. A lot of the material here comes from the National Archives in DC. Some of the pieces are specific to locations like the camp in Wyoming that is now a museum managed by the Wyoming Pioneer Museum. Some of the pieces are still on active military bases,
Okay.
like in Hawaii. The exhibit was partially supported by the Australian Research Council. That's part of this international group of 6 scholars working on this topic. And one of the outputs of that larger grant will be a digital archive of sorts that will pull various examples from around the world. But we don't have a single institution that's really taking care of this, which is part of what makes it really hard to find information and to preserve it, right?
Over my shoulder is a photo of a tank.
Yes.
Tell us about the tank.
The tank was made by my paternal grandfather, Donato Ruberto, who was one of these prisoners who was taken prisoner in North Africa, transported all over the world by the British before he was eventually brought to the US, where he was in 3 or 4 different camps here in the US. He became a collaborator in ISU. And at some point here in the US, he built that tank, a model tank, out of salvaged wood, and he also built a submarine. After the end of World War II, he goes back to Italy, and he lives in Italy and eventually immigrates to the Americas and to the US. As a child, growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I used to see this tank in a cousin's house, and I thought it was very strange to be told that my Italian immigrant grandfather had built it when he was a prisoner of war in America. It didn't make any sense to me as a child, right? But it was there. I kind of always knew about it, and it really wasn't until I was a graduate student, after unfortunately he had passed, so I didn't get to talk to him about it, that I started sort of digging around this story. On the same panel where that tank appears in the exhibit, we have a photo from the National Archives of an Italian POW showing off a model ship to a US soldier. So it was clearly something that they did.
This project itself has so much more to it that needs to be uncovered, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so this is where our not yet existent programs of Italian diaspora
Exactly.
studies, right? These would be wonderful thesis projects.
It would. Well, and that's part of the reason why I just shared it.
Well, listen, we've given a lot to our viewers, and thank you for taking the time out. Thanks.
Thank you.
At its 50th anniversary New York Gala, NIAF honored outstanding Italian and Italian American leaders, including a dear friend of the Institute, Claudio De Vellis, Carly Petrillo, Sal Palantonio, and Marco Troncone, who received the NIAF DEA Roma Award, while Lorraine Grillo was presented with the Mario Cuomo Public Service Award by former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Presidente Robert Allegrini, how are you? Welcome to Italics.
Grazie. It's a pleasure to be with you once again. Always happy to have you here at a NIAF function. Tonight we are celebrating our 50th anniversary, so very pleased to be doing it here in New York at Cipriani, and it's going to be a fantastic evening.
It's been an incredible journey. I literally went back and found a photo from 1985. I was a college student.
Oh my God.
And we were working on a program to deal with the dropout rate. It was one of the first programs that Calandra Institute was involved with, and Governor Cuomo's wife, Matilda Cuomo, was involved. And there's this tall, lanky 21-year-old up in the corner with these glasses, which were, I don't know why I'm wearing glasses that large, but that was my first connection to the National Italian American Foundation 40 years ago. Now I think back to those days, and I try to think of what would the 21-year-old John Calvelli say to the 61-year-old John Calvelli. And I think it's really about don't forget youth, don't forget the young, don't forget your heritage and culture, and make sure that you pay it forward.
Joe Del Razo, welcome to Italics once more.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you. So today was a special day. We had the round table this morning. Tonight we're here at the gala. 50 years of NIAF. You're one of the veterans here tonight.
I'm the longest tenured board member. And I'm also honored to be the chair of the 50th anniversary celebrations.
So how far back do you go with NIAF?
I was elected to the board in 1988.
Oh my God, and here you are.
And it's been a great run.
Presidente, devo congratularmi con lei perché la regione Lazio è stata, cioè, si festeggia quest'anno.
Eh sì, è regione d'onore, poi in un anno così importante, i 50 anni del NIAF, è un momento davvero speciale, per noi è un onore, davvero sento proprio questo orgoglio di appartenere a questa incredibile comunità. Anche qui negli Stati Uniti gli italiani si sono fatti valere e il NIAF è un ambasciatore straordinario.
The National Italian American Foundation is proud to honor Marco Troncone with the Special Achievement Award in Infrastructure and Economic Growth.
I'd like to sincerely thank NIAF for this prestigious award and to congratulate the organization on its 50th anniversary and its extraordinary work in preserving and promoting the Italian heritage in the United States. I have to share this award with the entire Aeroporti Roma team. 4,500 passionate professionals whose extra effort, whose final unique Italian touch is the one that really makes the difference between a very good airport and that special place we aspire to be. I'd like to thank NIAF for this honor. It inspires really to continue doing our best to go ahead and beyond and to foster deeper connections between our great nations. Thank you very much.
The National Italian American Foundation is proud to honor Sal Palantonio with the Special Achievement Award in Broadcast Journalism.
I feel like I'm in the middle of a dream. I'm dreaming. And this dream has lasted over 100 years, 105 years to be exact. 105 years ago, my grandfather Nicholas came from Calitri, landed in Ellis Island. 105 years ago, 1920. Ellis Island is exactly 10.5 miles from this place. The serendipity of it is so beautiful, and it matches the most important number for tonight, and that is 50. 50 years of the National Italian American Foundation. And we're going to say it together with a glass. Come on. Scenda! 100 years. 105 years for my grandfather, 50 years for National Italian American Foundation. Thank you very much. I said this to Joe a little while ago. I said, you know, my mission when I go on the air is the same as the National Italian American Foundation, to tell our story in our voice the right way.
The National Italian American Foundation is proud to honor Claudio De Vellis with the Special Achievement Award in Financial Services.
What an honor it is for me and my family that I get to stand here tonight surrounded by so many fellow Italian Americans. People who understand that success isn't just built on hard work, but on the sacrifices of those who came before us. When I reflect on my own family's journey, I'm filled with admiration and humility. I am sure many of you feel the same way about your parents and grandparents. To my parents, thank you for raising us in faith and in a home that has taught us the meaning of respect, hard work, and what it means to live with integrity.
The National Italian American Foundation is proud to honor Carl Petrillo with the Special Achievement Award in Heavy Civil Construction.
Here in this country, we focus on college, and we very much do a terrific job of it. Sending your son, daughter to college is really a goal of most families. When you then look a bit further, only 62% of college students end up earning a 4-year degree within 6 years of the time they started to matriculate. Apprenticeship training programs that are they're so prominent in Europe, throughout Europe, England in particular. Start something like this, talk to business, co-sponsor a program that can help millions of our young people.
The National Italian American Foundation is proud to honor Lorraine Grillo with the 2025 Mario Cuomo Award in Public Service.
We are so grateful to have NIAF, which continues to tell the true story of the Italian American people and our contribution. My father was all about public service. He was an Italian American, and he was representing the Italian American people. And he was always very aware of that, and he was very proud to do it, and to do it with total integrity. But if he could nominate a person for the award, he would nominate Lorraine Grillo, because Lorraine Grillo represents those exact values.
I could not have ever imagined receiving such a prestigious award. To receive this award, the Mario Cuomo Award for Public Service from NIAF, is probably the highest honor I could ever have achieved. I'm so grateful to NIAF for this incredible honor and for giving me such a life-changing moment. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this episode of Italics. I'm Anthony Tamburri. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata.